Hello and welcome to Treasure in Every Verse. I'm your host, author and Bible teacher Kevin Madison. Thank you for joining us today. Okay, friends, we're back and we're going to get right back into our study on the church at Smyrna, and hopefully we can wrap this up. But where we left off is we were talking about the Jews. So what was happening in the early church? The early church, primarily, folks, was made up of Jewish believers. It started off with the disciples, the 120 that was there, then the 500. Then it expanded at on the day of Pentecost when Peter stood up and gave his message. Um, and you had thousands of people came to the Lord right there on the spot. And then there was another 2 or 3 thousand that came later, and it just started expanding. But remember, it started off Jewish. So what was happening? You had the Judaizers that came and followed Paul. These are the Jews that you read in the early books of early chapters of the book of Acts that followed Paul all over the place. And what did they do? They did exactly what Paul claimed that they did in the book of Galatians. And what was that? They tried to mix law and grace. They just couldn't figure out that transition from law to grace. They were stuck, friends. And that is a dangerous place to be. It becomes a doctrine of demons when you mix the two. So we talked about that. And we seen here, this is all part of the blasphemy of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. So God said, hey, look, don't fear any of those things that's going to come your way. Why? Because if you go back and read the book of Acts, you can clearly see what was happening when Paul went into Ephesus. What did they do even when Paul left? They punished the guy who was with Paul. They wanted their pound of flesh. They started putting people in prison. And then Rome started persecuting. Why? Because the Christians separated themselves from the culture. And that's always a bad thing. Not that it's bad for the Christians, it just singles us out because we won't participate and made the common culture feel like they were wicked and we were better. Not that we were saying that we're better, that is Christians. The Christians never said that. What they were saying is, I'm going to honor the one true God and not serve Satan. And people don't like being called children of the devil. All right. So that's what was happening. Now, watch. Let's go back and let's pick up where we left off. We seen and went through the doctrine of legalism. So we know what that is. We went through Galatians chapter 2. And then we got to this. We got to Gnosticism. This is where people flat out deny that Jesus Christ is God. And I pointed to you to some of these cults. Cults, friends. That's what they are. Mormonism is a cult. Jehovah's Witness is a cult. All right. They deny that Jesus Christ is God. Judaism, for all its truth concerning the scriptures, it's a cult. Why? Because they flat out deny that Jesus Christ is God. You say, well, isn't the Jews part of that? Doesn't matter to me. Or God, who's a part of that? You understand? Wasn't it the Jews that said Jesus Christ wasn't God? I didn't say that. They picked up rocks to throw at him and to kill him. Why? Because they said he was claiming to be God and he wasn't. So they denied the deity of Christ. Friends, listen, please don't be embarrassed to be right when it comes to the word of God. If God calls somebody a child of the devil, look, you can't come out and say, hey, it's not right for us to call people a child of the devil. Then what are they if they're not? Whose child are they? Or are they a child of God? No, then folks, there's only one family left. Just one. So if they're a child of the devil, they're a child of the devil. That's just the way it works. All right. So John said, hey, test the spirits. Then we came here and we got to the doctrine of humanism. And I started telling you about what started happening. You started having these cities over in Asia Minor. Now, for the Roman Empire, friends, you have to think about what was going on in the Roman Empire. When you think about Roman Empire, let me see if I have it open. Um, let's go here. So when you think about the Roman Empire in Asia Minor, look, yeah, this is a better one right here. Look at this map. Okay, so Rome essentially had all the Aegean. They had all this area right here, including Italy. I mean, everything that you see here, and this is at the northern tips of a lot of these countries. They had all this area right here. I mean, they had it all. They controlled it all. So the real Roman focus, while the capital essentially was Rome because they were Roman folks, the majority of all the Roman Caesar worship took place right here. There was more gospel preached right here in that area than any other, right here in Turkey. So, friends, look, that was the focus. So we come back and we take a look at this. So that's where the Caesar worship. They had temples for Caesars and all that stuff in those cities. Where did it start though? Did it start with Rome? No, no, it started with Babylon. It started with Nebuchadnezzar. Then it went out with the Medes and Persians. Then when Greece came in, they started building a bunch of temples, Hellenizing the whole world, right? And that's where it came from. But you know who was still there, still part of that group? The early Babylonian priests. They never went out, friend. They just transitioned from one location to another location. That's all the Babylonian priests did. And they mingled or commingled with the Medes and Persians, and the Persians left them alone. But the Greeks, Alexander the Great, didn't like that. Neither did his generals, who became essentially their own little rulers over four sections of the divided Greece empire. They didn't particularly like that. So that's when the Babylonian priests went underground, but they came right back up when Rome took over. We'll get into that later because it is actually part of the study. All right. So they denied the one true God, and they started doing these human worship, essentially Islam, with Muhammad, Christian Science, which isn't Christian nor science, Scientology, same thing, Hinduism, focus on man, atheism, focus on man, communism, focus on man. It's all just man-made stuff. And then, one of the big things is that they had a king. This is the Jews saying, hey, we have no king but Caesar. So what did the leaders of Israel do? They kicked God out just like they did back in the days of Samuel. I showed you that where God said, no, Samuel, they're not kicking you to the curb. They're trying to kick me. I'm the real king. I'm the one telling you what to do. They're kicking me out, and they want a man in my place. All right. So all these false doctrines have at their core this one single theme. I will come to God on my own terms, and God has no choice but to accept it. Now, most people won't say it that way. You know what they would say? Well, that's your belief. Even though you just simply read exactly what God said in the book, you must be born again. Oh, that's your belief. No, that's what the books say. Well, my God would never limit it to just that one way. What Jesus said, he limited it to just one way. He said, either you come by me or you don't get in. I'm the door. I'm the way. I'm the truth. I'm the life. You can't come to God but by me. Oh, that's what you say. See, that's what they say here instead of saying, you know, I'm going to come to God on my own terms and God have no choice but to accept it. If God is not willing to accept my terms, then I don't need him. will do whatever I please, when I please, how I please, because it pleases me, and there's nothing you can do about this, God. What is this? And from where did this originate? The core message of all the false religion, better known as idolatry today. And today, folks, what is idolatry? Is it people going around bowing down to little statues? Well, some people still do that, right? Uh, they still do it in Islam to Mecca. They still do it in Catholicism to all these statues that they have. They still do it with images of photos and all this kind of crazy stuff, folks. So these Indian religions, not the nation India, well, them too, uh, but the natives of America and indigenous people, they still bow down to either the creature or to statues. All right. But today in the American culture, the Western culture, it's called covetousness. Covetousness. So God says, hey, if you're coveting something, that's idolatry today. And it has always been idolatry because you're coveting another God. All right. It began with Lucifer, better known as Satan. So I showed you this last time. The five I wills, I will ascend into, I will exalt my throne, I will also sit, I will ascend above, I will ascend into, I will exalt my throne, I will also sit, I will ascend above, I will be like the Most High. So I walk